this is for my Social Studies Honor Society oral history. I am with my grandfather, whom I call Pop Pop because that comes up, and we will be discussing his experiences during the Cold War. Could you start by stating your name and the year you were born?
Tom Giddens. I was born on March 27th, 1940, many moons ago.
And could you just talk a little bit about your experiences during the Cold War?
Well, the main experience was when the Soviet Union broke up and became the Confederation of Independent States. The main experience that I had was as the CEO of a non-profit, non-government organization called Sister Cities International, which was linking U.S. cities, and still does, with other cities around the world for education, culture, business, technology, city issues, city matters. And in 1986, at the height of the Cold War, there were only 10 U.S. and Soviet sister cities. By 1992, after the Soviet Union broke up, there were 94 U.S. cities that had sister city relationships with all of the former Soviet states. So all now were different countries. In September of 1991, we had a U.S.-Soviet sister city conference in Cincinnati, Ohio. Cincinnati was the sister city, still is, of Kharkiv, Ukraine. At that time, it was all part of the Soviet Union. And when the mayors from all the different cities got on the airplane to come to Cincinnati, they were coming as representatives of Soviet cities. When they landed in Cincinnati, they were now all of a sudden mayors of cities of different countries. The mayor of Tashkent, Uzbekistan, was now from Uzbekistan, not the Soviet Union. Including Russia. The topic's very interesting today because yesterday I was at a forum in Washington, which was sponsored by the Eurasia Center and called the U.S.-Russia Forum. And the reason for the forum, which is an annual thing, but the focus on the forum yesterday was Ukraine, but it has to do with a lot of other issues that have become more critical between the United States and Russia. And so there was a lot of reference at this forum yesterday, which included, for example, people like Ambassador Jack Matlock, who was ambassador in the Soviet Union when there was the breakup at the end of the Cold War. The old evil empire, as President Reagan used to call it. And now the question is there a new evil empire? Is there a new freezing of relations between the United States and Russia? And is that now signaling the possibility of a new Cold War?
Could you speak to any of the effects that you noticed the Cold War was having in America, daily life?
During the Cold War period, I think the effects were a general misunderstanding between the Soviet Union and fact, Ukraine as one of the current controversies, because Ukraine actually did dismantle and get rid of all their nuclear facilities and nuclear weapons. There was an agreement that would be recognized as part of the stability for the new sovereign country of Ukraine. And now that Russia has annexed Crimea, which is part of Ukraine, there are arguments that this violates that nuclear agreement. And what other chance is there for nuclear agreements with Iran and other countries, particularly Iran, if they won't be abided by? So that's a current result of controversy classified as the New Cold War. But I think during the Cold War, in the Cold War period, there was just a lot of mistrust. As I said, President Reagan called Russia the empire. And it wasn't until President Gorbachev came along and into power in Russia, in the Soviet Union, that there was the opportunity to go beyond those threats. In aspects of the relationship between the U.S. and those countries within the Soviet Union. So there was a lot of high interest at the local level throughout the United States in doing something, getting involved, having an opportunity for two-way dialogue rather than just fear. And in fact, prior to the 1991 conference I mentioned in Cincinnati, the first U.S. Soviet conference, sister city was in Tashkent, Uzbekistan, in 1989. And at that time, there were still only 10 U.S. Soviet sister cities. But there were 90 other cities on that airplane that went to Tashkent, Moscow and Tashkent, that wanted to do something, wanted to crack the barrier of the Cold War, wanted to get rid of the animosity and the fear and the doubt that the Cold War raised.
Could you talk a little bit more about your role in the sister cities?
Well, Sister Cities is a national organization in the United States, a nonprofit organization. I was the CEO, Chief Operating Officer, so the head of the association. So my role was to manage the staff and to help expand the program, not only with Russia or the Soviet Union, but with countries throughout the world. When I started as CEO, there were a couple hundred total relationships with U.S. cities and cities around. When I left, we had about 2,000 relationships between U.S. cities and cities all over the world, and a lot of expanding relationships, not only with the former Soviet Union, but after the Cold War, with China, and particularly with China, Latin America, very strong, and now a very strong emphasis on relations between U.S. cities and cities in Africa. So I mentioned Jack Matlock was the ambassador in Moscow during the breakup of the Soviet Union. When he came to Cincinnati, he came as the former ambassador. He was just leaving his post. And my understanding is that it was questionable whether the plane would take off from Moscow because of the fact that the Soviet Union was breaking up. And they had all of the mayors gathered from the different cities around the Soviet Union. They weren't quite sure whether they now all could travel or even come to the United States under the circumstances. But there was a lot of political pressure and a lot of pressure from local governments around the former Soviet Union to go ahead with it. So the plane did take off from Moscow, and we had arranged for it to land. It was an Aeroflot. I don't know if you know, but Aeroflot was the largest airlines in the world during the Soviet Union. When the Soviet Union broke up, Aeroflot also broke up into about 180 different airlines. Uzbek Air, Ukraine Air, 180 different airlines spun off of Aeroflot. That's one of the results of the breakup of the Soviet Union. But we arranged for Aeroflot to land directly in Cincinnati. Prior to that, Aeroflot had flights only to New York and Washington.